Good evening. My name is Harold Mendelson, and this will be a short presentation, and the topic is for History 701D02, and the subject matter is for the second week, and that is to use the JSTOR databases to locate some journal entries with regards to this specific topic. Topic I'm selecting is Admiral Halsey, who was an admiral in World War II that worked in the Pacific Ocean, and this is specifically regarding two incidents in which he was made some actions where he resulted in the loss of lives and the damage of equipment. Both of these incidents had a court of inquiry involved, and I'll get into that right now. The first incident took place off the northeast coast of the Philippines, where he had been on station with his Task Force T03, and his job was to provide support for General MacArthur's troops on the island of Luzon, and they were going in to capture the Manila and the rest of the island and end the Japanese threat and presence in the Philippines. On December 17th, 1944, he was on station and was told that because he was running low on supplies and he needed to refuel, to withdraw and go to a specific base where he could be refurbished and resupplied, and then wait for orders. He did that, and on the way out, which was normal, he had planes up in the air that were acting as scouts to observe in case there were any enemy activity going on that he needed to be aware of. One of the pilots that was flying had spotted a cyclone, which is basically a hurricane, only worse, and he plotted the location, speed, and direction. He relayed that information back to the task force, and as a result, Admiral Halsey ordered that there'd be plots to plot out the direction and then to change course to avoid being hit with the cyclone. All that was going, they were going. Unfortunately, the cyclone changed direction, and the task force ran into the cyclone. It was actually the outer fringe, and these were destroyers. So immediately went into damage control and started communicating, had all of the ships in his task force communicate back their location, and there were 4 destroyers that were not heard from. He feared that they were sunk. He knew where their last positions were. They were reported, and he headed in that direction. And sometime later, before he actually got there, one of the destroyers had lost its mast and was in a position to repair that. And when they got it repaired, they contacted the task force and told them what had happened. And in the process, they had rescued one sailor from the ocean. And he was able to tell them what ship he was on and that the ship itself had capsized and that there were men in the water. He relayed that information to Admiral Halsey, and Admiral Halsey gave orders that if his ship, the destroyer, was seaworthy, to go out to that locations of where those other destroyers were located and look for possible survivors. And he had also sent other destroyers that were in that area to do the same thing. Well, they picked up a total of 93 men that were in the water. Anytime that there is any kind of an incident like this, there's a court of inquiry held. And the court of inquiry was held. Admiral Halsey gave testimony. It turned out that the court of inquiry said that you were okay, you did what you were supposed to do, and no further action was taken. June 3rd, 1945, Task Force 3 was located off the southeastern coast of Okinawa, providing support for the Marines and the soldiers on Okinawa. It was the same basic situation. He was ordered to retire, go to a certain location, and get refurbed, refitted, and wait for orders. He did that. The weather was a little bad where he was located, and bad enough that he could not send off any aircraft. And so as he was heading towards that base, he ran into right in the middle of another cyclone, typhoon. And he, again, after it was hit, he took damage control and had all of the ships in the task force notify them that what their damage control was, damage to the ships. He did not hear from 4 destroyers and was feared that they were sunk. Well, 3 of them were. The 4th one had damage to its mast and lost its ability to communicate by radio. Well, Halsey knew where the last reported locations of these ships were, so he headed the whole task force in that direction and specifically assigned those destroyers that I had mentioned to go out and look for any possible survivors. What happened then was they retrieved 93 live sailors. Total loss, actually no, they didn't have to retrieve anybody. The total loss was only 3 sailors, and his ships were in a position where the typhoon hit the middle of the convoy task force. Damage control was doing what they could to resolve issues. One of the ships involved was a aircraft carrier that was an Essex class, the largest size aircraft carriers we had in the war at that time. It was large in the flight deck, which is where the planes take off and land from. The bow or the front of it, either through wave action or through wind or both, was actually curled over and wrapped around the bow. Another court of inquiry was held. He was sent to, while that ship was going in for repairs and the rest of the task force going in for repairs, he was ordered to return to Honolulu, which he did, Pearl Harbor, and a court of inquiry was held. This time, they found him negligent and suggested further action. And as a result, They expected to have a court-martial. There on Hawaii, Admiral Nimitz was there, as was the Secretary of the Navy. He was there because they were plotting the invasion of the home islands. And he wanted to be in on this to see what was going on. They knew it was going to be a long, hard campaign. Well, as it turned out, what they also did was they said, okay, Admiral Halsey, we're not going to do anything. The guy was a hero. It was just bad luck that it happened. You know, that's just what happens during wartime. So we're not going to do any further judicial action against him. So they overrode the Court of Inquiry's findings. As it turned out, instead of the war being much longer, they dropped the 2 bombs, one on Nagasaki, the other one on Hiroshima, and the Japanese surrendered. So after going to the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay, Nimitz is ordered back to stateside, and shortly thereafter, he having been in the Navy for almost 40 years, he decided to allow him to retire, and he does so. Now, there's a 5th star opening, and they have to pin it on somebody, and they selected Admiral Halsey, and they made him a 5-star admiral. As it turns out, about a year or so later, he retires. And from the day after that action, in which the Court of Inquiry ruled that he was negligent, but he didn't actually get any judicial punishment. He was spending the rest of his life defending his actions. Well, that's the end of this presentation. I'm going to post this video and ask you guys to review it and see what your responses are. I felt that he should have been relieved of command, given his judicial punishment, and retired. But that's me. So thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to your replies. Have a good evening.